Hello class! Today I will be going over my web quest, Conflict of Origin, the history of early America. Well, as you can see, this is my introduction page. It provides us a brief overview of what it would be like to be someone who specializes in researching American history. In this case, we take the role of a museum curator slash historian. So you'd begin here by first reading the academic standard that we're trying to cover today. This academic standard reads, explain the origins, developments, main events, and consequences of European overseas expansion through conquest and colonization in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. So as students would begin to gaze through this page, they'd move down from the academic standard and ask themselves these interrogative questions to get them in the framework of becoming a museum curator or a historian for this specific project. Here are these two illustrations to represent early Native American and European settler life. So once they have soaked this in and read this, they would go down here, and this reads, fellow historians and museum curators alike, if you're ready to be briefed on your adventures through the parallels known as the exploration period of American history, then please click here. So we're going to click here to explore it on the next task. The task provides further overview of what I'm asking my students to do for this project, and I'll let you read over this yourself. So you'd begin up here and start pondering and reading through this. You come down, and this is a short blurb about what I expect for this project, and my expectation is that students develop a timeline that represents Native American and European settler events that are distinct to the 1520 and 1670 AD, and this is also known as the exploratory period. And that's step number one. So here's just a very brief overview. And we move down. This is more of the integration part of the project. It brings together the timeline, and this gives you another overview of what drawing tool we're using to make a historical replica or illustration of Indian culture. And on top of that, I do explain that there's also reflection involved. And here it kind of just integrates what exactly I'm asking, what my expectation is for my students, and also it's worded in a way that a curator or a historian might be familiar with to get students in that mindset that this isn't just a project, it's a web quest, it's an adventure to go on. So after reading that, if you're ready to saddle up and go on an exploration, just like our ancestors, please do click on the process, which we are going to in this case. So moving on to the process, it's basically a task page, but more in detail and explaining the tools that I used. So basically, to sum up, I do have this process, step number one, outlined right here, as you can see, audience. It gives you a short tool or just short blurb on what a timeline tool is and why timelines are important, and that's right here. It's a systematic tool to help to map out important dates so people can visualize them. And that's essential if you're going to be a museum curator or historian or a social studies or history teacher like myself. And right here are brief steps. It's a very easy tool to use, but here are some brief steps on how to use that timeline tool. I'll let you follow that on your own time. And if you scroll down a little bit, here's an illustration of my sample timeline that I created. And on top of that, it gives you examples of what I'm asking for. As you can note, I'm requiring 2 examples of each of these things on the timeline at least. And that's step 1. And here's step 2, the multi-step process. I didn't feel like I should break it up into 3 sections because it wasn't cohesive enough for 3 sections. So it'd be easier to combine a historical illustration and a reflection in one. I feel like it'd also be more beneficial to my students. As you can see, it's a 6-step process, but 3 main steps, 3 steps in itself. As you scroll down, you start reading, you can see that I'm asking you to create a historical accurate illustration using the WAP drawing tool. I can go ahead and open that right now. So this is what you're going to be seeing right here. And I did provide a little description on how to use this basically. So this is basically just a tool that you're going to use to make a realistic description of Native American and European culture, as this does not represent that as of right now, as you can see. So use the WAP drawing tool to make a representation of Native American culture, and then we're going to merge the timeline and the illustration together. And lastly, there's a reflection here, a minimum of a paragraph reflection, and it's asking you to reflect on your personal thoughts regarding these 3 topics. So it's a project that requires you to not only do your own personal research on what excites you about Native American European settlers culture. It also asks you to then again visualize what you just learned by drawing a virtual picture of it, and then lastly reflecting over on everything and asking yourself these questions as you're reflecting. And here's a short blurb on how to use the, once again, very easy WAP drawing tool. Very concise steps here. And these are just more examples of artistic elements and drawings that I'm looking for in your virtual drawing tool. And as you can see here, again, once again, highlighted in purple, the adventure is almost history. Click on here, click on the evaluation to see how you did. So that basically lets the student know that they are basically done and it's time to move on to the evaluation. Okay, Rhonda, basically, I'm not sure why, but this is gonna work on your computer. It's not working on mine, but there's a rubric here, believe me. And students can cross-verify how do they think they did, and I'll give them a real copy of that. And once again, down in purple, it's time to move on. So now that you know how you fared as a historian, let's wrap up and get debriefed about this case at hand by clicking here on conclusion. So here's another picture of European and Native American life, and students would basically get debriefed on what they just did by reading these 2 paragraphs, and these 2 paragraphs basically sums up why what they did is important. So in short, the timeline helped them visualize different concepts of the past. So it's not just a jumble of notes, not a jumble of numbers. They actually have a realistic representation, and with that representation they can then in turn, using that understanding that they just accumulated, create a realistic picture and then reflect on it. And you can read all this here. And lastly, after I do sum up the project itself in the web quest, leave the students on a tone that adds to further reflection. I would want them to check out the works cited page. And here is just another very short blurb that shows where exactly I got my pictures, and it corresponds exactly to the pictures I use on the web page. And lastly, the tools that I use, giving credit to both the Timeline Maker and the WAP Drawing Tool, which are great, fantastic tools to use in the classroom. Thank you for listening, class.